Welcome to Elizabeth's Stories. I share gripping true tales of betrayal, heartbreak, and family strife, exploring hidden resentments and shocking deceits. Subscribe and hit the bell for weekly videos that reveal mysteries and truths. Share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. Let's dive in. The air in my living room was thick with the scent of deceit, sharp as winter pine, and heavy as the shadows pooling in the corners. Amanda stood before me, her smile a crescent moon, beautiful cold, and hiding its darker half. Beside her, the notary, a wiry man with eyes like a startled owl, shuffled papers with a rhythm that felt like the ticking of a clock, counting down to my ruin. His briefcase lay open on the coffee table, a black maw ready to swallow my future. I met Amanda's gaze, my own smile, a blade honed by 68 years of survival. Perfect timing. I said, my voice steady as the oak floor beneath my feet. But before we sign anything, let's make a quick stop at the police station. They've been waiting to hear about the documents I sent them yesterday. The color drained from Amanda's face, her porcelain mask cracking like frost under a sudden thaw. Her eyes, usually so calculated, flickered with something primal fear, perhaps, or the realization that she'd misjudged the old woman she thought she could bury. The notary froze, a pen hovering over his papers, like a vulture caught mid-descent. "Mrs. Henderson," he stammered, "I'm not sure I follow." "Oh, you will," I replied, folding my hands calmly in my lap. "Soon enough. If you're reading this, you're probably wondering how I ended up here standing toe-to-toe with a daughter-in-law who thought she could outwit me, a woman who's weathered storms she can't even imagine. My name is Dorothy Henderson, and at 68, I'm no stranger to betrayal. But this story, oh, this story is different. It's a tale woven with secrets threaded with the kind of magic that lives in the bones of those who refuse to break. It begins with the most humiliating day of my life and ends with a triumph that even I couldn't have foreseen. So, settle in, because this is no ordinary tale. It's a labyrinth of lies, a dance with shadows, and a reckoning that burns brighter than any fire. 2 days ago, I stood in the shadowed nave of St. Agnes's Church, watching my only son Michael marry Amanda under a stained glass window that bathed them in fractured light. The church was the same one where I'd married his father 35 years ago, its pews worn smooth by generations of promises, some kept, some broken. Amanda was radiant, her white gown shimmering like moonlight on a frozen lake, and for a fleeting moment I let myself hope. Hope that we could forge something real, something warm despite the chill that had always lingered between us. After all, she carried my grandchild, a tiny spark of life that felt like a second chance. But hope, I've learned, is a dangerous thing. It blinds you to the snakes coiled in the grass. The reception was held at the Willow Creek Country Club, a place that still smelled of the polish I'd scrubbed into its floors as a waitress to put Michael through college. I'd poured every cent of my savings, $15,000 scraped from Social Security checks, from nights eating stale bread, to save on groceries, into that wedding. It was my gift to them, a sacrifice born of love, though I'd begun to suspect Amanda saw it as something else entirely. A debt. A leverage. At the reception, Amanda stood at a table of her sleek city-bred friends, her voice dripping with honey as she raised a glass. "Dorothy's been such a help," she said, her words gliding over the crowd like a spell. "She's been living with us for months, helping with the down payment on our house. Such a generous mother-in-law." The women smiled, their lips tight, their eyes darting to me with pity. I felt their thoughts as clearly as if they'd spoken them aloud. Poor old woman, probably too frail to manage on her own. What Amanda didn't tell them was how I'd ended up in their spare room. 3 months ago, she'd woven a web of concern, her voice trembling with crocodile tears. What if you fall, Dorothy? She'd asked her hand on Michael's arm. What if something happens and no one finds you for hours? Before I knew it, my cozy apartment, the one I'd called home for 12 years, was deemed unsafe. They'd moved me into their house, promising it was temporary, just until we found something better suited to my needs. And that $15,000 I'd given them for their house, it had morphed into a loan they'd repay when things settle down. Funny how things never settle when someone's spending your money. I stood there, clutching my glass of cheap champagne, feeling the weight of their stares. Amanda's words were a performance each syllable, a carefully placed stone in a path leading to my erasure. She called me practically family, but the way she said it made my skin prickle as if I were a guest overstaying my welcome in my own son's life. The room spun slightly, not from the wine, but from the dawning realization that I was not just a mother-in-law to her. I was prey. That night, as I lay in the spare room they'd given me, I heard whispers through the walls, Amanda's voice low and urgent speaking to Michael. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was sharp, like a blade being whetted. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me. Not fear, not yet, but something older, deeper. A spark of intuition. A gift I'd inherited from my grandmother, a woman who'd once whispered to me that the world was full of secrets, and those who listened closely could unravel them. I didn't know then what Amanda was planning, but I felt it like a storm gathering on the horizon. And I knew one thing for certain: I'd survived worse than her. And I'd raised a son alone after his father's death, worked double shifts in a world that chewed up women like me and spit them out. I'd learned to read people to see the truth behind their masks. And Amanda. She wore hers well, but it was starting to slip. The next morning, I woke to find her sitting at the kitchen table. Their kitchen table, as she'd taken to calling it with the notary beside her. His name was Mr. Patterson, and he carried the air of a man who'd seen too many deals go sour, but still believed in the power of a signature. Amanda's smile was a polished gem, bright and hard. Dorothy. She said, her voice as smooth as the silk scarf around her neck. We need to discuss some paperwork. I poured myself coffee, my hands steady, despite the pulse of unease in my chest. What kind of paperwork, I asked, though I already suspected the answer. She exchanged a glance with Mr. Patterson, a flicker of triumph in her eyes. Michael and I have been talking, she said. We think it's time to make some changes. You've been so generous with the house down payment, and we want to ensure you're taken care of as you age. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Taken care of. How Mr. Patterson cleared his throat, his fingers twitching toward his briefcase. Mrs. Henderson, your son and daughter-in-law have arranged for you to move into Sunset Manor, a lovely assisted living facility with round-the-clock care. They've already put down a deposit. My mug hit the table with a thud. Without asking me. We wanted it to be a surprise. Amanda said, her voice soft, but her eyes sharp as flint. Michael's been so worried about you living independently. And frankly, Dorothy, you've seemed forgetful lately. Forgetful. The word was a dagger aimed at my pride. I was 68, not 98, and my mind was sharper than the lies she was spinning. But I saw it now, the pattern she'd been weaving for months, little comments about misplaced keys, gentle corrections, when I recalled events differently than she did. She'd been planting seeds, cultivating a narrative that I was fading, frail, unfit to manage my own life. And the house I asked, my voice low, the one with my name on the deed alongside Michael's, Amanda's smile, didn't waver. But something shifted in her gaze, a shadow fleeting but unmistakable. Actually, Dorothy, that's part of what we need to discuss. Michael and I want to refinance, and it would be simpler if the property was solely in our names. Cleaner paperwork, you understand, and my $15,000 I pressed watching her closely. Consider it a wedding gift, she said sweetly. After all, you want your son to be happy, don't you? The notary shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting to his watch. He didn't know he was standing in the middle of a theft, one executed not with guns, but with words and smiles. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch, and felt that spark inside me flare brighter. Amanda thought she was playing a game of chess, moving her pieces with precision. But she didn't know I'd been playing this game for decades, and I always kept an ace hidden in my sleeve. "Where's Michael?" I asked, my tone deceptively calm. "Shouldn't he be here for this?" Amanda didn't miss a beat. "He's at the gym. He finds all this financial talk stressful, so he thought it best if I handled it. Newlywed stress, you know." I nodded, as if I believed her. But I knew my son. Michael had always avoided confrontation, sending letters, instead of facing me when he wanted something, letting others deliver bad news. At 42, he was still hiding behind intermediaries, and Amanda was the perfect shield. But shields can crack, and I was about to test hers. "Mrs. Henderson, the notary," said, his voice gentle but firm. "These documents would have you sign away your claim to the property in exchange for assisted living costs covered for the first year." 1 year, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. And after that, Amanda shrugged her delicate shoulders, lifting like wings. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe you'll love Sunset Manor so much you won't want to leave." The audacity was breathtaking, like a thief offering you a trinket while pocketing your life's savings. I stood my movements, slow, deliberate. I need time to think about this. Amanda's mask slipped just for a moment, revealing a flash of irritation. "Dorothy, Mr. Patterson has other appointments. It would be more convenient if we handled this now." "I'm sure it would," I said, meeting her gaze. "But I'm not signing anything today." The notary nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Take all the time you need." As they left, I stood alone in the living room. I'd helped furnish the walls, I'd helped paint the house I'd helped buy. Amanda thought she'd cornered me, but she'd forgotten one thing. I'd been Michael's mother for 42 years. I knew his heart, his flaws, his fears. And I knew something else, something older, something my grandmother had taught me under a starlit sky. The world is full of secrets, but those who listen closely can unravel them. I'd been listening, Amanda, and I was ready to unravel you. The stained glass windows of St. Agnes's Church glowed like embers in the late afternoon sun, casting fractured rainbows across the pews where I sat watching my son Michael bind his life to Amanda's. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies and wax, the kind of perfume that clings to memory, whispering of promises made and broken. 35 years ago, I'd stood at that same altar, my heart full of dreams that time would both fulfill and shatter. Now, at 68, I watched my only child step into that same circle of hope, his hand clasped in hers, her white gown shimmering like frost on a winter lake. For a moment, I let myself believe in her radiance, in the possibility that she could be the daughter I'd never had, the mother of my grandchild, the keeper of my son's heart. But there was something in her eyes, a glint, like a blade catching moonlight, that made the spark inside me flicker, a warning inherited from my grandmother, who taught me to see what others missed. The church was alive with whispers, not just from the guests, but from the walls themselves, as if the old stones held secrets they longed to share. My grandmother had called it the listening, a gift passed down through the women in our family, a quiet knowing that stirred in the presence of deceit. As Amanda vowed to love and honor Michael, her voice clear as a bell, I felt it, a tremor in the air, a shadow beneath her words. I pushed the feeling down, chiding myself for doubting her. She was carrying my grandchild, after all, a tiny life that felt like a bridge to a future I'd almost stopped believing in. But doubt, like a seed buried deep, has a way of sprouting when you least expect it. The reception at Willow Creek Country Club was a different kind of stage one I knew too well. Decades ago, I'd scrubbed its parquet floors, balanced trays of champagne flutes, and smiled through aching feet to earn enough to send Michael to college. Now I walked its halls as a guest, my $15,000 contribution to this wedding, a sum scraped from Social Security checks from nights, eating stale crackers to save on groceries weighing heavily in my mind. The room was a glittering cage filled with Amanda's friends, their designer dresses, and sharp laughter. A stark contrast to my simple navy suit, bought secondhand but worn with pride. I'd given everything for this day, not just money, but pieces of my heart, believing it would bind us closer as a family. How naive I'd been. Amanda held court at a table near the dance floor, her laughter a melody that drew eyes like moths to a flame. She raised her glass, her gaze sweeping the room before settling on me, and I felt the spark inside me flare, sharp and insistent. "I want to thank Dorothy," she said, her voice sweet as honey laced with venom. "She's been such a help living with us for months, contributing to the down payment on our house. Such a generous mother-in-law." The words were a spell crafted to charm, but laced with something darker. The women at her table smiled, their eyes flicking to me with a mix of pity and condescension. I could almost hear their thoughts. Poor old woman clinging to her son, probably too frail to live alone. My fingers tightened around my glass, the champagne gone flat. Amanda didn't mention how I'd ended up in their spare room, how she'd woven a tapestry of concern to convince Michael my apartment was a death trap. What if you fall? Dorothy, she'd asked, her eyes glistening with tears that never fell. What if you're alone and no one finds you for hours? Her words had been so convincing, so perfectly pitched, that even I'd started to doubt myself. 3 months ago, I'd packed up my life. My books, my grandmother's quilt, the little teapot I'd bought after my husband died, and moved into their house. It was temporary, they said, just until we found something better suited to your needs. I'd believed them, or at least I'd wanted to. But the $15,000 I'd given them for their house, the money I'd saved through years of sacrifice, had become a loan they'd repay when things settle down. I'd learned long ago that things never settle when someone's spending your money, but I'd held my tongue, hoping love would outweigh greed. Now, as Amanda's words hung in the air, I felt the weight of every eye in the room. She'd painted me as a dependent, a relic who needed her son's charity, and the humiliation burned like a coal in my chest. But there was something else, too, a whisper from the spark inside me, urging me to look closer. I noticed the way Amanda's fingers lingered on her glass, the way her smile tightened when she mentioned the house. There was a secret there, hidden in plain sight, and I was determined to find it. The speeches came next, each one a thread in the tapestry of the evening. Michael stood his broad shoulders, filling out his tuxedo, his smile as bright as the boy who'd once promised to build me a house with his own hands. "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible," he said, his voice warm with gratitude. "My beautiful wife, our families, and of course my mother, who's always been there when we needed her." The applause was polite, expected, but it felt hollow to me. I wanted to believe in his words, to feel the love I'd poured into him reflected back. But there was a distance in his eyes, a hesitation I hadn't noticed before. Had Amanda already begun to pull him away from me? Or was it my own fear casting shadows? I clapped along with the crowd, my hands steady. But inside the spark was humming, warning me that something was wrong. Then Amanda rose her gown, catching the light like a siren's call. The room went quiet, every eye drawn to her elegance, her grace. "I also want to say something about Dorothy," she said, her smile so bright it could have lit the chandeliers. She's been living with us for months now, and I've learned so much about family loyalty from her. My heart swelled a fragile hope, blooming despite my instincts. Maybe I'd misjudged her. Maybe this was her way of reaching out of building a bridge. But then she continued her words sharp as thorns beneath their velvet coating. Dorothy's taught me that real mothers never stop taking care of their children, no matter how old they get. Some mothers step back when their sons marry, letting the wife take over. But not Dorothy. She's shown me that a mother's job is never done. The applause was uncertain now, a murmur of confusion rippling through the crowd. I felt the weight of their stares, each one a pinprick against my skin. Amanda wasn't praising me. She was branding me. A mother who couldn't let go a burden, who clung to her son's life like ivy choking a tree. The spark inside me flared hotter, and I saw it clearly. Now this was no accident. Every word was a calculated move, a piece in a game I hadn't realized we were playing. She's even helping us financially. Amanda went on, her voice rising with a martyr's fervor. Because that's what mothers do. They sacrifice everything for their children's happiness. It's truly inspiring to see someone so selfless. The silence that followed was deafening, a void that swallowed every sound except the pounding of my heart. I understood now with a clarity that cut like glass. Amanda had turned my love, my sacrifice, into a weapon. She'd painted me as a dependent, a woman who'd outlived her usefulness, whose only role was to give and give until there was nothing left. The spark inside me burned brighter, whispering a truth I couldn't ignore. Amanda wasn't just undermining me, she was erasing me. I stood my movements, slow, deliberate, as if I could hold back the storm gathering inside me. Thank you, Amanda, I said, my voice carrying across the room, for reminding us all what family means. Her smile faltered just for a moment, and I saw it, the flicker of unease, the realization that I wasn't as pliable as she'd thought. As the band struck up a new song, I slipped away from the crowd, my steps taking me to the edge of the terrace, overlooking the country club's gardens. The night air was cool, laced with the scent of jasmine and something older, wilder. I closed my eyes, letting the spark guide me, and felt my grandmother's voice in my mind as clear as if she stood beside me. Listen, Dorothy, she'd said, her hands cupping my face under a starlit sky. The world hides its truths, but we see them. We always see them. I opened my eyes, the garden below shimmering in the moonlight, its shadow shifting as if alive. Amanda thought she was in control, that her carefully crafted words and calculated tears would bend me to her will. But she didn't know about the spark, about the strength that had carried me through loss and hardship, through nights when the world seemed too heavy to bear. She didn't know that I'd been listening, watching, waiting. The reception continued behind me, a blur of laughter and clinking glasses, but I felt the threads of her plan tightening around me. The house, the money, the move to their spare room, it was all part of a design, one I was only beginning to unravel. I touched the locket at my throat, a gift from my grandmother, its surface warm against my skin. Inside was a tiny vial of ash, a relic from a fire she'd set to burn away a lie that threatened our family long ago. Fire reveals truth, she'd told me, and I was ready to light a match. As I turned back to the reception, I saw Amanda watching me from across the room. Her eyes narrowed as if she sensed the shift in the air. I smiled, letting her see the steel beneath my calm exterior. She thought she was the hunter, but she'd forgotten something crucial. Even the smallest spark can start a blaze. And I was no ordinary flame. The morning after the wedding, I woke to a house that felt less like a home and more like a labyrinth, its walls closing in with secrets I could almost hear whispering. The spare room where I'd been relegated was small, its single window framing a gray dawn that matched the unease curling in my chest. The spark inside me, My grandmother's gift, that quiet knowing she'd called the listening, hummed like a distant storm urging me to pay attention. I dressed carefully, choosing a sweater the color of storm clouds, as if armoring myself for what was to come. I didn't know what Amanda had planned, but I felt it sharp and cold as a blade pressed to my skin. Downstairs, the kitchen was a stage set for betrayal. Amanda sat at the table, her silk robe gleaming like a serpent's skin, her smile as polished as the silverware she'd bought with my money. Beside her was Mr. Patterson the notary, his briefcase open like a trap waiting to snap shut. His eyes darted to me as I entered, nervous, as if he sensed the undercurrent of something darker than a simple legal transaction. "Good morning, Dorothy Amanda," said her voice a melody of false warmth. "I hope you slept well after such a big day." I poured myself coffee, the mug warm against my hands, grounding me. As well as can be expected, I replied, my tone even, but laced with the steel I'd learned to wield over decades of survival. "What's this about paperwork?" Amanda exchanged a glance with Mr. Patterson, a flicker of triumph in her eyes that made the spark inside me flare hot and bright. "Michael and I have been talking," she said, her words as smooth as the lies they carried. "We think it's time to make some changes. You've been so generous with the house down payment, and we want to ensure you're properly taken care of as you age." The coffee turned to ash in my mouth. Taken care of. The phrase was a velvet glove hiding a fist, and I knew better than to trust it. Taken care of, how, I asked, setting the mug down with a deliberate clink. Mr. Patterson cleared his throat, his fingers twitching over a stack of papers. "Mrs. Henderson, your son and daughter-in-law have arranged for you to move into Sunset Manor, a lovely assisted living facility, with round-the-clock care. They've already put down a deposit." The words hit like a gust of winter wind, sharp and chilling. Sunset Manor. I'd never heard of it, never been consulted, never imagined my life reduced to a deposit paid without my consent. My coffee mug struck the table, harder than I intended, the sound echoing like a warning shot. Without asking me, Amanda's smile didn't waver, but her eyes were flint-hard and unyielding. "We wanted it to be a surprise," she said, her voice soft as a lullaby, but sharp as a shard of glass. "Michael's been so worried about you living independently. And frankly, Dorothy, you've seemed forgetful lately. Forgetful." The word was a poison dart aimed at my pride, my independence, my very sense of self. I was 68, not 98. My mind as sharp as the locket at my throat, the one holding my grandmother's vial of ash, a reminder that truth could burn through lies. But Amanda had been weaving this narrative for weeks. Hadn't she? Little comments about misplaced keys, gentle corrections. When I recalled a conversation differently, a slow drip of doubt meant to erode my confidence. The spark inside me pulsed, whispering, "She's building a cage, Dorothy, and she thinks you're too old to escape." "And the house?" I asked, my voice low, steady, though my heart thundered. The one with my name on the deed, alongside Michael's. Amanda's smile tightened a crack in her perfect facade. "Actually, Dorothy, that's part of what we need to discuss. Michael and I want to refinance, and it would be simpler if the property was solely in our names. Cleaner paperwork, you understand." And my $15,000, I pressed, watching her closely, the spark guiding my gaze to the subtle shift in her posture, the way her fingers curled like talons around her coffee cup. "Consider it a wedding gift," she said, her sweetness so cloying it made my teeth ache. "After all, you want your son to be happy, don't you?" The audacity was breathtaking, a theft dressed in silk and smiles. Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably, his eyes flicking to his watch, as if he sensed the storm brewing in the room. He didn't know he was a pawn in a game, far older, far darker than he could imagine. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch, feeling the spark hum with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. "Where's Michael?" I asked, my tone deceptively calm. Shouldn't he be here for this? Amanda didn't miss a beat, her voice as smooth as ever. He's at the gym. He finds all this financial talk stressful, so he thought it best if I handled it. Newlywed stress, you know. I nodded as if I believed her, but the spark told me otherwise. Michael had always avoided confrontation, sending letters, instead of facing me, letting others deliver bad news. At 42, he was still hiding, and Amanda was his shield, a shield with a hidden blade. I thought of the whispers I'd heard through the walls. Last night, her voice sharp and urgent, his muted and uncertain. What had she told him to keep him away? What lies had she spun to make him complicit, Mrs. Henderson? Mr. Patterson said, his voice gentle but firm. These documents would have you sign away your claim to the property in exchange for assisted living costs covered for the first year. One year, I repeated, letting the words hang like a curse. And after that, Amanda shrugged her shoulders, lifting with a delicacy that belied her ruthlessness. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Maybe you'll love Sunset Manor so much you won't want to leave. The spark flared hot and bright, and I saw it now, the full shape of her plan, as clear as if my grandmother had drawn it in the ashes of her fire. Amanda wasn't just after my money. She was after my life, my independence, my place in the world. She wanted me gone, tucked away in a facility where I'd be forgotten, my name erased from the deed, my savings swallowed by her greed. But she'd made a mistake, one as old as the stories my grandmother told me, under starlit skies. She'd underestimated the power of a woman who listens. "I need time to think about this," I said, standing slowly, my movements deliberate as if I could hold the spark's fire in check. This isn't a decision to rush. Amanda's mask slipped just for a moment, her eyes narrowing like a predator scenting resistance. "Dorothy, Mr. Patterson has other appointments today. It would be more convenient if we could handle this now." Convenient. The word was a lie wrapped in politeness, and it made the spark burn brighter, its heat spreading through my veins. "I'm sure it would be," I replied, meeting her gaze with one of my own, letting her see the steel beneath my calm exterior. "But I'm not signing anything today." Mr. Patterson nodded, relief flickering across his face like a candle in a draught. "Of course, Mrs. Henderson. Take all the time you need." He began packing his briefcase. His movements hurried as if he sensed the danger in lingering. Amanda's smile returned, but it was brittle now, a facade cracking under pressure. "We'll talk later, Dorothy," she said, her voice tight. "We only want what's best for you." As they left, I stood alone in the kitchen, the silence heavy with the weight of what I'd just uncovered. The spark whispered its voice, as clear as my grandmother's. "She's weaving a web, Dorothy, but webs can be broken." I walked to the window, looking out at the garden I'd helped plant, its roses now wilting in the autumn chill. Amanda thought she'd cornered me, that her carefully laid plans would trap me like a fly in silk. But she didn't know about the spark, about the strength that had carried me through loss and hardship, through nights when the world seemed too heavy to bear. She didn't know about the locket at my throat, its vial of ash warm against my skin, a reminder that truth could burn through lies. I turned from the window, my mind racing, the spark guiding my thoughts like a beacon. Amanda's plan was clear. Now move me out, take my money, erase my name from the deed. But there was something else, something deeper, hidden in the shadows of her words. The spark hummed, urging me to look closer, to listen harder. I thought of the house, its walls holding secrets I hadn't yet uncovered. I thought of Michael, absent today, his silence a puzzle I needed to solve. And I thought of my grandmother, who'd taught me that the world was full of truths, hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who dared to see them. I moved to the living room, my steps quiet but purposeful. and opened the drawer where I kept my most precious belongings. Inside was a journal, its leather cover worn smooth by years of use. A gift from my grandmother when I was a girl. I flipped it open, my fingers tracing the words she'd written on the first page. "The truth is a fire, Dorothy. Let it burn." I began to write, recording every detail of Amanda's words, her glances, the notary's unease. The spark guided my pen, its heat steadying my hand. This was no ordinary battle. It was a war of shadows of secrets, and I was ready to fight. As I closed the journal, I felt the locket pulse against my skin, a faint warmth that seemed to echo the spark inside me. Amanda thought she was the hunter, but she'd forgotten one thing: even the smallest flame can ignite a wildfire. And I was no ordinary flame. The silence in the house after Amanda and Mr. Patterson left was a living thing heavy with the weight of secrets and the echo of my own heartbeat. I stood in the living room, the walls I'd helped paint staring back at me like silent witnesses to a crime. The spark inside me, my grandmother's gift, that primal knowing she'd called the listening, burned brighter now, a flame fed by Amanda's audacity. She thought she'd cornered me, that her carefully woven lies would bind me like chains. But she didn't know I'd been forged in harder fires, that I'd learned to read the world's shadows long before she was born. I wasn't just Michael's mother. I was Dorothy Henderson, keeper of truths, and I was ready to fight. The locket at my throat pulsed its vial of ash, warm against my skin, as if my grandmother's spirit was stirring, urging me forward. I moved to the staircase, my steps deliberate, each one a defiance of the cage Amanda was building around me. Their bedroom, her bedroom as she'd taken to calling it, was at the end of the hall, a sanctuary where she thought her secrets were safe. She'd insisted on storing my fireproof box in their closet, somewhere safe. She'd said her smile as sweet as poison. Safe for her, perhaps, but not for me. I'd let her believe I was too frail, too trusting to question her. That was my first move in this game. The closet smelled of lavender and ambition, her designer clothes hanging like trophies. I found the box tucked behind a row of shoeboxes, its lock glinting like an eye in the dim light. My fingers, steady, despite the years, turned the key I'd kept hidden in my locket, a precaution Amanda hadn't anticipated. Inside were the documents I'd guarded like relics. The original deed to the house, my name etched beside Michael's in black ink. The canceled check for $15,000 marked down payment, and the power of attorney papers Michael had asked me to sign 6 months ago, presented by Amanda as a precaution in case I became incapacitated. I'd read every word of those papers 3 times before signing, and I'd insisted on a clause, one Amanda didn't know about, that made the power of attorney void unless 2 independent physicians confirmed my mental incompetence. I was 68, not senile, and my mind was a blade honed by decades of survival. I carried the box to the kitchen, where the morning light filtered through the window like a confession. The spark guided my hands as I spread the documents on the table, each one a piece of armor in the war I was about to wage. But there was something else, something the spark urged me to find. I returned to the closet, my fingers brushing against a hidden panel in the wall, a secret I'd discovered months ago, when I'd heard the faint creak of wood during one of Amanda's late-night whispers. I pressed it, and the panel slid open, revealing a small cache of papers and a leather-bound notebook. My heart quickened, the spark flaring as I opened the notebook. Amanda's handwriting filled the pages, meticulous and cold. A ledger of lies. Dates, notes, calculations. March 15th, Dorothy left stove on March 22nd. Told Michael she forgot dinner plans. April 3rd. Suggested she's struggling to follow conversations. Each entry was a thread in the web she'd woven, a calculated effort to paint me as frail, forgetful, unfit. The spark burned hotter now, a fire that whispered, "She's underestimated you, Dorothy. Show her who you are." I tucked the notebook into my sweater, its weight a promise of retribution. Amanda thought she could erase me, but she'd forgotten that I'd been Michael's mother for 42 years. I knew his heart, his fears, his silences, and I knew how to play the long game. That afternoon, while Amanda was out getting her post-wedding manicure, another expense funded by my sacrifice, I sat at the kitchen table, the documents and notebooks spread before me like a map of her betrayal. The spark guided my pen as I began to cross-reference her notes with my own memories. March 15th, I'd made toast that day, not used the stove. March 22nd, Amanda had canceled our dinner plans herself, then lied to Michael. April 3rd, I'd asked her to speak louder because she was whispering, not because I couldn't follow. Each lie was a brick in the wall she was building to trap me, but bricks can be dismantled, and I was ready to tear it down. I heard the front door open, Amanda's heels clicking like a predator's claws on the hardwood. She appeared in the doorway, her manicured nails gleaming, her smile a mask that no longer fooled me. "Dorothy," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I hope you've had time to think about our conversation this morning. Mr. Patterson can come back tomorrow if you're ready to move forward." I looked up, my eyes meeting hers, letting her see the fire behind my calm. "I've been thinking," I said, my voice steady as stone. "And I have a few questions." Her smile faltered a crack in her armor. "Of course," she said, sitting across from me, her posture perfect, her eyes wary. "What's on your mind?" I slid the notebook across the table, its pages open to her damning entries. "Let's talk about March the 15th. I began, my voice low but sharp. "You told Michael I left the stove on after breakfast. Except I made toast that day, Amanda. In the toaster. Not a single burner was touched." Her face remained expressionless, but I saw the wheels turning behind her eyes, calculating, reassessing. "I must have been mistaken," she said, her tone light dismissive. "It's easy to mix things up." "Is it?" I flipped to another page. March 22nd. "You told Michael I forgot our dinner plans and made other arrangements. Except you canceled on me that morning, didn't you? I have the text message to prove it." Amanda's fingers twitched, a subtle tell the spark didn't miss. "Dorothy, I don't know what you think you're proving." April 3rd, I continued cutting her off. "You suggested I was struggling to follow conversations because I asked you to repeat something. What I actually asked was for you to speak louder because you were whispering." April 18th. "You told the neighbor I was confused about what day it was. I'd asked if it was Tuesday or Wednesday because I was recovering from the flu, a detail you conveniently omitted." Her jaw clenched, her composure fraying like a rope under strain. "You're being paranoid," she said, but her voice had lost its honeyed sweetness, replaced by a cold edge that matched the glint in her eyes. "Am I—" I leaned forward, the spark burning bright, guiding my words. "Or have you been building a case against my mental competency for months, cataloging every minor mistake, every normal moment of fatigue to convince Michael I'm unfit to manage my own life?" Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor like a warning. "I don't have to listen to this. You're being ridiculous, Dorothy. Hurtful." The spark flared, and I felt my grandmother's presence, her voice whispering, "Hold your ground, Dorothy. Truth is your weapon." I opened the folder from the fireproof box, spreading the documents across the table like a hand of cards I'd been saving for this moment. "If I'm so ridiculous, let's talk about this," I said, tapping the deed. "My name's on this house, Amanda, alongside Michael's, and this I held up the canceled check, my $15,000 clearly marked as a down payment, not a gift. And this power of attorney, it's void unless 2 doctors confirm I'm incompetent. Care to call my physician and test that theory?" Her face went pale, her eyes darting to the documents as if they were a trap springing shut. "You weren't supposed to." She stopped catching herself, but it was too late. The spark had seen the truth, and I wasn't letting it slip away. Weren't supposed to, what I pressed my voice calm but unyielding. Find out you've been lying to Michael, manipulating him into thinking I'm a burden, planning to strip me of my home and my independence. How dare you? She whispered, her face flushing red, her mask crumbling. How dare you accuse us of theft? I'm not accusing you of theft. I said, my gaze locked on hers. I'm asking a legitimate question. If this is truly about my well-being, why does it end with you gaining full ownership of a property I helped buy? Amanda's eyes narrowed, something ugly flickering across her face, something calculating cold, like a shadow moving beneath still water. You're making this so difficult, she said, her voice low, almost a hiss. We're trying to help you, Dorothy. To protect you. Protect me. I stood matching her height, letting the spark fuel my resolve. Or protect yourselves. If this is about my safety, let's modify the arrangement. I'll consider assisted living, but the house stays in both names, mine and Michael's. That way you get your peace of mind and I keep my financial security. Her silence was a chasm, her eyes burning with a fury she could no longer hide. The paperwork is already drawn up, she said finally, her voice tight. Paperwork can be changed. I replied, my tone as steady as the locket's warmth against my skin. For a long moment we stared at each other, the kitchen a battlefield, the air thick with the scent of her desperation. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and bitter. You know what your problem is, Dorothy. You can't let go. You can't accept that Michael has a wife, now a family of his own. You want to keep controlling his life, keeping him dependent on you. The accusation hit like a physical blow, striking at the heart of my fears. Had I held Michael too close? Had my love become a chain? The spark flickered, but I held its fire steady, refusing to let her words unravel me. Even if that were true, I said, my voice steady. Despite the pain in my chest, it wouldn't justify deception. It wouldn't justify trying to steal my assets and my independence. Steal Amanda's voice, rose, her composure shattering. You gave us that money freely, Dorothy. You moved in here by choice. Nobody forced you, didn't they? I stepped closer, the spark burning bright. My grandmother's voice echoing in my mind. Truth burns, Dorothy. Let it. You convinced me my apartment wasn't safe. You undermined my confidence with your little comments about my memory, my safety, my autonomy. You've been setting this up for months, haven't you? Building a case to make me seem incompetent so you could take everything. Her face went still, her mask slipping completely, and for the first time I saw her as she truly was, a predator who'd misjudged her prey. You're being ridiculous, she said, but her voice was hollow, stripped of its charm. I opened the notebook again, holding it up like a talisman. Then explain this. Explain why you've been documenting every moment you could twist into evidence of my decline. Explain why you told the wedding planner I was confused about details when I simply disagreed with your choice of flowers. Explain why you told Michael I was fixated on money when I asked reasonable questions about my $15,000. Amanda's eyes widened, her breath, catching, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. The spark burned brighter, its heat guiding my words, my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for my money or my home. I was fighting for my life, for the truth, for the woman I'd always been. And Amanda, with all her cunning, had no idea what she'd unleashed. The kitchen was a battlefield, the air thick with the scent of betrayal, and the hum of the spark inside me, burning brighter than ever. Amanda stood across from me, her face a mask of fury and desperation. Her carefully laid plans unraveling like a tapestry caught on a thorn. The notebook lay open on the table between us, its pages a ledger of her lies, each entry a nail in the coffin of her scheme. I'd called her bluff, exposed her calculated campaign to paint me as incompetent, to steal my home, my money, my life. But Amanda was no ordinary adversary. She was a predator, and predators, when cornered, bare their teeth. "You're making a mistake, Dorothy," she said, her voice low, a hiss that slithered through the silence. Her eyes, once so polished and charming, were now sharp as shards of ice, glinting with a malice I hadn't fully grasped until now. "You think you've won, but you don't know what you're up against." The spark, my grandmother's gift, the listening flared hot in my chest, a warning that this moment was the fulcrum on which my future balanced. The locket at my throat pulsed its vial of ash warm against my skin, as if my grandmother's spirit stood beside me whispering, "Hold fast, Dorothy. Truth is your shield." I met Amanda's gaze my own, as steady as the oak table between us. "I know exactly what I'm up against," I said, my voice calm but edged with steel. "A woman who thinks she can rob me blind and call it love." Amanda laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and jagged. "Rob you. You gave us that money, Dorothy. You moved in here by choice. You can't rewrite history just because you're feeling paranoid." Paranoid? I leaned forward, the spark guiding my words, its fire burning away any trace of doubt. "I have your own words, Amanda. Your notebook. Your lies about my memory. My safety. You've been building a case to strip me of my rights, to lock me away in Sunset Manor while you take my home. That's not paranoia. That's evidence." Her face twisted, a flicker of something darker passing through her eyes, something almost inhuman, as if the shadows in the room clung to her like a second skin. "You're so dramatic," she said, but her voice trembled, betraying the crack in her composure. "We're trying to protect you, to give you a safe place to live as you age. Protect me." I stood, my hands resting on the table. The documents, deed, check power of attorney spread before me, like a hand of cards I'd played to perfection. By erasing my name from the deed, by convincing Michael I'm a burden, by orchestrating a lie so you can control my life. Amanda stepped closer, her presence a cold wind that made the spark flare hotter, urging me to listen to see. "You're not as clever as you think, Dorothy," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, intimate and menacing. "You want to play hardball. Fine, let's play hardball." She reached into her purse, her movements deliberate, and pulled out a small plastic bottle, its label glinting in the kitchen light. My blood turned to ice as I recognized it. A prescription bottle, the name Sarah Martinez printed in stark black letters. Xanax. The spark pulsed a warning scream in my mind as Amanda held the bottle up like a trophy. "Do you know what this is?" "Dorothy," I stared at the bottle, my heart pounding, the spark whispering danger. "Dorothy, she's woven a deeper trap. Those are Sarah's pills." I said, my voice steady, despite the storm in my chest. She asked me to pick them up because she couldn't get off work. I was supposed to drop them off before she moved to Phoenix. Amanda's smile was the most terrifying thing I'd ever seen, a crescent moon hiding a void. "Can you prove that?" she asked, her voice soft, taunting. "Sarah's gone, Dorothy. Moved away. No one to confirm your story. And this bottle, found in your purse. A prescription that isn't yours. A medication you've been hiding." The room spun the walls, seeming to lean in their whispers, growing louder, as if the house itself was warning me of the abyss I stood on the edge of. Sarah had asked me to pick up her prescription as a favor, a simple errand for a friend who'd been too busy to make it to the pharmacy. I'd forgotten to deliver the pills before she left, and they'd stayed in my purse, unopened, untouched. But Amanda had found them, and she'd turned them into a weapon. "You're going to claim I'm abusing drugs," I said, the realization dawning like a slow, cold sunrise. "You're going to say I'm addicted, unstable, unfit." Amanda's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "I'm going to express concern," she said, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. "Concern about your judgment, your potential addiction, your erratic behavior, combined with your documented confusion, your paranoia about financial exploitation, and your increasingly unstable accusations. Michael will have no choice but to pursue legal guardianship. For your own protection, of course." The spark burned white-hot now, a fire that threatened to consume me if I let it. She'd planned this every step, every lie, every trap. The notebook, the comments about my memory, the pills. It was a symphony of deceit, orchestrated to strip me of everything. My home, my money, my freedom, my son. "You planned this," I whispered, my voice trembling not with fear but with rage. "From the moment you convinced me to move in, you were building this cage." "I planned for contingencies," Amanda said coolly. Her composure restored, her eyes cold as winter stone. "I hoped you'd be reasonable, Dorothy, but I prepared for the possibility that you'd be difficult. Michael will do whatever it takes to protect his family. And I'm his family now. You're just the woman who raised him." The cruelty in her words was a blade cutting deep, but the spark held me steady, its fire a shield against her venom. I thought of Michael, absent today, hiding at the gym, letting Amanda wield her lies like a sword. I thought of the grandchild she carried, a life caught in the crossfire of her greed. And I thought of my grandmother, her voice clear in my mind. "Truth is a fire, Dorothy. Let it burn." "You think Michael will believe you?" I asked, my voice low, steady, the spark guiding every word. Over me. His mother. Amanda leaned forward, her breath warm against my face, her voice a venomous whisper. "Who do you think he'll believe, Dorothy? His pregnant wife carrying his child, or a confused old woman with a drug problem and paranoid delusions? You have 24 hours to reconsider your position. Sign the papers, move to Sunset Manor with some dignity, or fight me, and find yourself declared incompetent by a court." She turned to leave, the pill bottle still clutched in her hand, but paused at the doorway, her silhouette framed by the fading light. "Oh, and Dorothy," she said, her voice dripping with menace, "if you even think about telling Michael your version of this, remember you're the one with the pills. You're the one with the notebook full of paranoid accusations. You're the one who's been acting erratic. Who's he going to trust?" The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed was suffocating, a void that threatened to swallow me whole. I sank into a chair, my hands trembling, the spark flickering under the weight of her threat. The locket pulsed at my throat, its warmth a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't alone. My grandmother had faced her own battles, had burned away lies with the fire of truth. But this was a trap I hadn't seen coming, a web so tightly woven it could choke the life from me. I opened the notebook again, my eyes scanning Amanda's meticulous entries, each one a lie designed to erase me. The spark whispered, urging me to look deeper, to listen harder. I closed my eyes, letting its heat guide me, and saw flashes of memory, not just mine, but hers. My grandmother's images of a firelit night, her hands cupping the vial of ash, her voice promising. The truth always finds a way. I opened my eyes, my resolve hardening. Amanda thought she'd trapped me, but she'd made a fatal mistake. She'd underestimated the power of a woman who listens. I stood moving to the window, the garden outside shrouded in twilight, its shadows shifting as if alive. The spark burned steady, now a beacon in the darkness. I thought of the documents in my fireproof box, the deed, the check, the power of attorney with its protective clause. I thought of the notebook, its pages, a map of Amanda's betrayal. And I thought of the phone call I'd made yesterday while Amanda was out to Dr. Sarah Chen, my physician of 12 years. She'd confirmed what I already knew. My mind was sharp, my health robust, my competence unquestionable. I'd asked her to document it to send a report to my lawyer, a precaution Amanda hadn't anticipated. But the pills, those damned pills were a wild card, a lie that could undo everything. I needed more than documents, more than the spark. I needed proof irrefutable and undeniable to break Amanda's web. I moved to the phone, my fingers steady, as I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Detective Rodriguez from the Elder Abuse Division answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, his voice warm but professional. "What can I do for you?" "I need your help," I said, the spark guiding my words. "Someone's trying to take everything from me." As I explained, the spark burned brighter, its heat a promise that the truth would not stay buried. Amanda thought she'd won, but she didn't know about the fire in my blood, the legacy of women who'd faced down liars and thieves. She didn't know about the listening, the way the world whispered its secrets to those who dared to hear. And she didn't know that I'd already taken the first step to unravel her lies, a step that would bring her carefully crafted world crashing down. The locket pulsed a heartbeat of its own, and I felt my grandmother's strength flow through me. Amanda had made her move, but the game wasn't over. The spark was my guide, the truth my weapon, and I was ready to burn her lies to ash. The air in the house was charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting for the storm to break. I stood in the living room, the documents from my fireproof box spread across the coffee table, like a battle map. The deed with my name etched beside Michael's, the canceled check for $15,000, the power of attorney with its protective clause, and Amanda's notebook, its pages a damning testament to her lies. The spark inside me, my grandmother's gift. The listening burned steady and fierce a flame that had guided me through the labyrinth of her deceit. The locket at my throat pulsed its vial of ash warm against my skin, as if my grandmother's spirit stood beside me, whispering, "Truth is a fire, Dorothy. Let it burn." Amanda thought she'd trapped me with her threat of the Xanax bottle, her accusation of addiction, her meticulously crafted narrative of my decline. She thought I'd crumble under the weight of her ultimatum sign, "Away my rights," or face a court declaring me incompetent. But she'd underestimated me, just as she'd underestimated the spark, the legacy of women who'd faced down liars and thieves before her. I'd spent the night preparing my mind sharp as a blade, the spark guiding my every move. I'd called Dr. Sarah Chen, my physician, to confirm my mental clarity in a notarized report. I'd spoken to Detective Rodriguez, who'd promised to investigate Amanda's financial maneuvers. And I'd gathered my evidence, each piece a brick in the wall I was about to build around her. The doorbell rang its chime, slicing through the silence like a warning. I opened the door to find Mr. Patterson, the notary, his briefcase clutched like a shield, his eyes darting nervously as if he sensed the storm brewing. Behind him stood Amanda, her silk blouse pristine, her smile a polished blade. But there was a crack in her composure, a flicker of unease in her eyes that the spark didn't miss. She thought this was the moment of her victory, the day I'd sign away my life. She was wrong. "Good morning, Dorothy Amanda," said her voice dripping with false warmth. "I hope you've had time to reconsider. Mr. Patterson's here to finalize the paperwork for Sunset Manor and the property transfer." I stepped aside, gesturing them into the living room. "Come in," I said, my voice calm, but laced with the steel I'd honed over decades. "Let's talk." Mr. Patterson hesitated, his gaze flickering to the documents on the table, then to me. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, his tone cautious. "I trust you've reviewed the terms we discussed. I've reviewed more than that," I replied, my eyes locked on Amanda's. "Sit down, both of you. We have a lot to cover." Amanda's smile tightened, but she sat her posture perfect. Her hands folded like a queen, granting an audience. "Mr. Patterson took the chair beside her, his briefcase open, papers at the ready. I remained standing, the spark burning bright, guiding my words, my movements, my resolve. This was my moment, my battlefield, and I was ready to fight. Let's start with the house, I said, picking up the deed and holding it up, so the light caught the ink of my name. This document proves I'm a co-owner alongside Michael. The $15,000 I contributed here's. The canceled check was marked as a down payment, not a gift, despite what you've claimed, Amanda. Amanda's eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt her silence, a predator's pause. Mr. Patterson shifted uncomfortably, his fingers twitching over his papers. Mrs. Henderson, he said the transfer would simplify the refinancing process. Simplify for whom I cut in my voice, sharp as a whip. For you, Mr. Patterson, who stands to earn a commission. Or for Amanda, who seems very eager to erase my name from the deed. That's unfair. Amanda said, her voice smooth but strained. We're trying to ensure your future, Dorothy. Sunset Manor is a wonderful facility. Is it? I set the deed down and picked up the power of attorney, its protective clause, my shield against her lies. This document, which you pressured me to sign 6 months ago, requires 2 independent physicians to confirm any claim of mental incompetence before it takes effect. I spoke to Dr. Sarah Chen yesterday. She's prepared a report notarized and filed confirming my mental clarity. I'm 68, Amanda, not senile. Your narrative of my decline doesn't hold. Amanda's face paled, her composure cracking like frost under a flame. You're twisting this, she said, her voice low, dangerous. You're making it sound like we're trying to hurt you, aren't you? I opened her notebook, its pages a litany of her deceit, and slid it toward Mr. Patterson. Take a look, Mr. Patterson. Amanda's been documenting every moment she could twist into evidence of my confusion. March 15th. She claimed I left the stove on, but I used the toaster. March 22nd. She told Michael I forgot dinner plans, but she canceled them herself. April 3rd. She said I struggled to follow conversations when I simply asked her to speak louder. These aren't mistakes. They're lies carefully crafted to build a case for my incompetence. Mr. Patterson's eyes widened as he scanned the pages, his hands trembling slightly. Mrs. Henderson, these are serious allegations. They're not allegations. I said, my voice steady, the spark burning bright. They're facts. And then there's this. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folded email printed from Michael's computer the night before, a task I'd undertaken while Amanda slept, guided by the spark's whisper. This is an email exchange between you and Michael Amanda, dated 2 weeks ago. You wrote, once we get her into Sunset Manor, the house is ours, free and clear. The $15,000 is a small price to pay for full ownership. Care to explain? Amanda's face went white, her breath catching her eyes darting to the email like a cornered animal. That's taken out of context. She stammered, her voice losing its polish. I was discussing options, not options. I stepped closer, the spark flaring my grandmother's voice, echoing, let it burn. Options to steal my home. To lock me away in a facility I didn't choose, to convince my son I'm a burden, so you can control his life and mine. Mr. Patterson stood, his briefcase snapping shut, with a sound like a gunshot. Mrs. Henderson. I had no idea this was the situation. I was told this was a mutual agreement. You were lied to, I said, my gaze never leaving Amanda's, just as Michael was lied to. Just as I was lied to when I moved in, told my apartment wasn't safe, told my money was a gift, told this was all for my benefit. Amanda stood, her hands clenched, her eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to darken the room, as if the shadows themselves were drawn to her anger. You're delusional, she spat, her voice a venomous hiss. You're making this up, twisting everything to make me the villain. Michael will never believe you over me, won't he? I held up another document, a report from Detective Rodriguez delivered to my email that morning. I've spoken to the Elder Abuse Division. They're investigating you, Amanda, for financial exploitation. They've traced the $15,000 I gave you, and they've found discrepancies in your accounts, transfers to an offshore account in your name alone. Care to explain that? Her face crumpled, the last of her mask shattering, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice breaking. You can't take everything from me. I'm not taking anything. I said, my voice steady, the spark a beacon in the storm. I'm reclaiming what's mine. My home, my money, my dignity. And I'm giving you a choice, Amanda. Return the $15,000 and withdraw these fraudulent papers, or face the consequences when the police arrive. Mr. Patterson backed toward the door, his face pale, his eyes wide with panic. I think I should go, he said, his voice trembling. This is beyond my scope. If there's any question of legality. Go, I said, my tone firm but calm. But know that I'll be contacting your firm about your involvement in this. You should have asked more questions, Mr. Patterson. He fled, his footsteps echoing like a retreating army, leaving Amanda and me alone in the living room, the air thick with the weight of her defeat. She stood frozen, her eyes wild, her breath ragged as if she could feel the walls of her own trap closing in. You think you've won, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her hands trembling. You think this ends here. It ends when you stop lying. I said, the spark burning bright, its heat, a promise of justice. You tried to erase me, Amanda, but I'm still here. And I'm not going anywhere. She lunged forward, her hand reaching for the notebook, as if destroying it could erase her crimes. But I was faster, the spark guiding my movements, my hand closing around her wrist, with a strength I hadn't known I still possessed. Don't. I said, my voice low, unyielding. You've lost. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw not just anger, but fear. A fear that went beyond this moment, as if she sensed the power of the spark, the legacy of women who'd burned away lies before her. She pulled her hand back, her breath hitching, and sank into the chair, her face a mask of defeat. I was trying to protect us, she said, her voice small, broken. The house, the baby, our future. We're drowning in debt, Dorothy. You don't understand. I understand more than you think, I said, the spark steady its fire tempered by a sudden wave of pity. But you chose to steal from me, to betray Michael, to hurt the family you claim to protect. That's not love, Amanda. That's greed. She looked away, her eyes glistening, but I felt no satisfaction in her tears. The spark whispered, truth is enough. I gathered the documents, tucking them back into the fireproof box, the locket pulsing at my throat like a heartbeat. Amanda had thought she could break me, but she'd forgotten one thing: I was forged in fire, tempered by loss, strengthened by love. And no one, not Amanda, not her lies, could extinguish that flame. As she sat there silent and defeated, I heard the front door open, Michael's voice calling out, Mom, Amanda, you home. The spark flared, a signal that the next battle was coming. But for now, I'd won. I'd unmasked Amanda's scheme, reclaimed my power, and set the truth free. The locket warmed against my skin, my grandmother's voice echoing, You've done well, Dorothy. Now hold fast. And I would. For Michael, for my grandchild, for myself. The house was behind me now, its walls no longer a cage, but a memory fading like a shadow in the morning light. I stood in my new apartment, a small sanctuary across town, its windows open to a garden where roses bloomed defiantly against the autumn chill. The spark inside me, my grandmother's gift. The listening hummed softly, its fire tempered from the blaze of battle to a steady glow of triumph. The locket at my throat pulsed its vial of ash warm against my skin, as if my grandmother were whispering, "You've burned away the lies, Dorothy. Now build anew." And so I began one careful step at a time to reclaim the life Amanda had tried to steal. The day after the confrontation, I'd packed my belongings, my books, my grandmother's quilt, the teapot I'd bought after my husband's death, and walked out of the house that had become a battlefield. Amanda's silence as I left was a void, her eyes avoiding mine, her defeat a tangible weight in the air. Michael had stood in the doorway, his face etched with guilt, his voice breaking as he said, "Mom, I didn't know." The spark urged patience, a reminder that truth takes time to settle, and I'd squeezed his hand, feeling the love that still bound us, despite the chasm Amanda had carved. "We'll talk soon," I'd told him, and left the locket warm against my chest, guiding me toward a new beginning. My apartment was modest, its walls bare, but full of promise. The first night I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, the spark humming softly, a companion in the quiet. The garden below seemed alive, its roses swaying as if whispering secrets of their own, their petals catching the moonlight like embers. I'd faced Amanda's lies, her notebook of fabricated failings, her scheme to erase my name from the deed, her chilling threat with the Xanax bottle, and I'd won. Not with anger, but with the quiet power of truth sharpened by the spark in my grandmother's legacy. Yet the victory was bittersweet, shadowed by Michael's absence during the fight, his silence a wound that lingered like a bruise. A week later, an unexpected knock broke the stillness of my new life. Patricia Amanda's mother stood at my door, her silver hair pulled back, her eyes heavy with a sorrow that mirrored my own. The spark flickered wary, but curious, as I invited her in. She sat on my second-hand sofa, her hands clasped tightly as if anchoring herself against a storm. "Dorothy," she said, her voice soft but resolute, "I owe you more than words can say." I poured her tea, the act grounding me, the spark whispering, "Listen closely." For what I asked, though the spark already sensed the weight of her confession. For Amanda, she said, her gaze meeting mine raw with honesty. I didn't know the full extent of her plans, but I should have seen the signs. She's my daughter, and I failed her long before she failed you. The spark hummed a confirmation of the truth in her words. Patricia reached into her bag, pulling out an envelope, its edges worn as if she'd held it too long. "This is for you," she said, sliding it across the table. $15,000, the money you gave them for the house. I sold my mother's jewelry to cover it. It's not enough to undo the pain, but it's a start. I stared at the envelope, the spark pulsing with a mix of gratitude and caution. "Why now?" I asked, my voice steady, the locket warm against my skin. Patricia's hands trembled, her fingers tracing an invisible pattern on the table, as if drawing the shape of her guilt. Amanda's done this before, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. In her first marriage, she took money from her father-in-law's account, claiming it was for family expenses. I covered it up, then thinking it was a mistake, a moment of weakness. But now, she looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I see the pattern. I see the harm she's caused. And I can't let her destroy you, too." The spark flared, a sudden heat that illuminated the depth of Amanda's betrayal. It wasn't just me she'd targeted. It was a habit, a shadow that had followed her through years, a darkness she'd chosen to embrace. I took the envelope, my fingers brushing the paper, feeling the weight of Patricia's remorse. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But this doesn't erase what she did." "I know," Patricia said, her voice breaking, "but I hope it helps you rebuild." The spark whispered, "She speaks truth." I nodded. setting the envelope aside. "It does," I said, "and I'm grateful." Patricia left her silhouette fading into the evening light, and I sat alone, the spark settling into a gentle glow. Amanda's actions had left scars, but they'd also revealed my strength, a fire I hadn't known I still carried. The spark had guided me to see her lies, to uncover her notebook, to confront her with the truth. And now, it guided me to rebuild, to find peace in the life I was crafting. Days turned to weeks, and the consequences of Amanda's actions unfolded like a storm breaking. Detective Rodriguez's investigation had dug deeper than I'd expected, uncovering not just the $15,000 she'd taken from me, but a trail of financial manipulation stretching back to her first marriage. She was arrested for elder abuse and fraud. Her trial a swift reckoning, 18 months in prison, and a restitution order to repay me, though I knew the money was gone, swallowed by her greed. I didn't care about the dollars anymore. The spark had shown me that true wealth was in my independence, my dignity, my truth. Michael came to me soon after, his face weary, his eyes shadowed with regret. He stood in my apartment holding a photo of Emma, his newborn daughter, my granddaughter. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I failed you. I let Amanda blind me, and I didn't see what she was doing until it was too late." The spark urged compassion, and I took his hand, feeling the warmth of the son I'd raised, the man I still loved, despite his mistakes. "You're here now," I said, my voice steady, the locket pulsing at my throat. "That's what matters." He told me he was selling the house, the one I'd helped buy, to repay part of the $15,000 and to start fresh, free from the weight of Amanda's betrayal. "I want to make this right," he said, his eyes meeting mine. Raw with honesty. "For you, for Emma, for us." The spark hummed a soft confirmation of his sincerity. "We'll make it right together," I said. And for the first time in months, I felt the chasm between us begin to close. Emma's birth was a bridge, a new beginning, her tiny hand in mine, a promise of hope. I held her close, her warmth a reminder of why I'd fought, not just for myself, but for hers, for the family we could still be. I began to rebuild my life piece by piece, in the quiet of my apartment. I joined a book club, my love of stories rekindled by the spark's gentle nudge. I volunteered at a community center teaching knitting to young women who reminded me of myself at their age, fierce, uncertain, full of dreams. The spark guided me, its warmth a constant companion, whispering of truths, yet to uncover of a world still full of mysteries. The locket pulsed at my throat, a reminder of my grandmother's legacy, of the women who'd come before me, who'd faced their own battles and won. One evening, as I sat on the balcony, the garden below shimmering in the moonlight, I thought of Amanda. Not with anger, but with a strange clarity. She'd tried to erase me, to dim my light, but in doing so she'd forced me to rediscover my strength, to listen to the spark, to burn away the lies. In her failure, she'd given me a gift, the chance to see myself as I truly was, a woman of fire, of truth, of unbreakable resolve. The spark hummed softly, a song of peace, and I smiled, knowing that my victory was not in her defeat, but in the life I was building, the love I was reclaiming, the legacy I would pass on. The garden outside my new apartment bloomed with a quiet defiance, its roses unfurling in the late autumn light, as if to remind me that beauty persists even in the hardest seasons. I sat on the balcony, a cup of tea steaming in my hands, the locket at my throat warm against my skin. The spark inside me, my grandmother's gift. The listening hummed softly now, a gentle glow rather than the fierce blaze it had been during my battle with Amanda. It had guided me through the labyrinth of her lies, through the pain of betrayal, to this moment of peace. The locket pulsed a faint heartbeat, as if my grandmother were sitting beside me, her voice whispering, "You've done well, Dorothy. Now rest." The weeks since the confrontation had been a whirlwind, but the storm had passed, leaving clarity in its wake. Amanda's world had unraveled under the weight of her own deceit. Detective Rodriguez's investigation had uncovered not just the $15,000 she'd siphoned, but a pattern of financial manipulation stretching back years. She'd been arrested for elder abuse and fraud, her trial swift and decisive, 18 months in prison, and a restitution order to repay me, though I knew the money was long gone spent on her hollow dreams. I didn't care about the dollars anymore. The spark had taught me that true wealth lay in reclaiming my life, my dignity, my truth. Michael had come to my apartment the day after Amanda's arrest, his face etched with guilt and sorrow. "Mom," he'd said, his voice breaking, "I should have seen it. I should have protected you." The spark had urged patience, and I'd taken his hand, feeling the weight of 42 years of love between us. "You're here now," I'd told him. "That's enough." He'd decided to sell the house using the proceeds to repay part of my $15,000 and to start fresh, free from the shadows Amanda had cast. Our relationship was mending thread by thread, strengthened by the arrival of my granddaughter, Emma, born just weeks ago. Her tiny hand in mine felt like a promise, a bridge to a future I'd fought for. I thought of Emma now as I opened my journal, its leather cover worn smooth by years of secrets and truths. The spark guided my pen as I began to write not for myself this time, but for her, a letter to be read when she was old enough to understand. "Dear Emma," I wrote the words flowing like a river finding its course. "You come from a line of women who listen, who see what others miss. Your great-grandmother taught me that the world is full of shadows, but those who carry the spark can light their own way. I wrote of Amanda not as a villain, but as a lesson, a reminder that greed and deceit can wear beautiful masks, but truth burns brighter. I wrote of the locket, its vial of ash, a relic of my grandmother's fire, a symbol of the strength we carry within. I wrote of the house, the money, the betrayal, and how I'd fought back, not with anger, but with the quiet power of knowing who I was. Never let anyone dim your light, Emma," I wrote. "Your strength is in your truth, in your ability to listen to the whispers of the world and stand firm in what you know is right." The spark hummed as I wrote its warmth, a confirmation that these words would reach her, would guide her as my grandmother's had guided me. I thought of the nights I'd spent under starlit skies, my grandmother's hands cupping my face, her voice weaving stories of women who'd faced down liars and thieves who'd burned away deceit with the fire of truth. That legacy had carried me through this battle, and now it would carry Emma too. I closed the journal, the locket pulsing softly, and looked out at the garden. The roses swayed in the breeze, their petals catching the fading light like embers. Amanda had thought she could erase me, but in her attempt she'd helped me rediscover my strength, my purpose. She'd forced me to listen, to fight, to burn away the lies that threatened to bind me. In a strange way, I owed her for that not gratitude, but acknowledgement. She'd been the storm that revealed the steel in my spine. I stood stretching my arms toward the sky, feeling the spark settle into a quiet glow, a companion rather than a warrior. The world was still full of shadows, but I was no longer afraid. I'd faced betrayal and emerged whole, my heart open to Michael, to Emma, to the life I was building. The locket warmed against my skin, a final whisper from my grandmother, "Live well, Dorothy. That's the greatest victory." I returned to the apartment, setting the journal on a shelf beside my grandmother's quilt, a tapestry of memories and strength. The spark would always be with me, a gift passed down through generations, a fire that would never go out. And as I looked out at the stars, beginning to pierce the evening sky, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I was Dorothy Henderson, 68 years old, a mother, a grandmother, a keeper of truths. And I was enough